Hello and welcome to the California MBA's DE&I committee presentation, Beyond the Rates, DE&I in the Mortgage Industry. I'm Susan Milazzo, CEO of the California MBA, and very happy that you could join us today. I'd like to welcome our committee chair, Ty Christensen, who's president of Arrive Home, to welcome our speakers and today's sponsor. Ty, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Susan, and thank you for joining us today. First and foremost, we want to thank our gracious sponsor, PCV Mercor, and their representative that's with us today is their Director of Client Relations, Candy Surry-Rot-Pai-Boone. Candy?
Thank you so much, Ty. Thank you for having me on. June is a time to celebrate diversity in all its forms and stand together in solidarity for a more inclusive and equitable world. At PCV Mercor, we recognize that a diverse workforce brings invaluable perspectives, drives innovation, and strengthens our ability to serve our clients effectively. By embracing DE&I, we not only strengthen our team and business, but also build trust within the communities we serve. We believe in ensuring that all voices are heard and considered, allowing us to serve everyone more effectively and equitably. After 43 years of appraisal management experience, our focus remains on being a reliable partner for accountability, connectivity, and performance, helping our clients and their customers nationwide make home ownership happen for everyone. To learn more about our future-ready solutions for today's appraisal management, visit us at www.pcvmercor.com. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'll hand it right back over to you, Ty.
Thank you so much, Candy, and thank you guys for being such generous sponsors to our committee, our podcast. We are very appreciative of all of your efforts and standing with us in partnership. I'm so excited to introduce everyone today to our speakers. First, we have Nora Guerra. Nora is with Freddie Mac. She is the Affordable Lending Senior Manager, and she's a recent recipient of the Freddie Mac CEO Award. Thank you, Nora. We also have Ricardo Pinedo, President of Suntender Valuations and Certified Speaker for the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. I'd love to turn the time over to both of you, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say today.
Ty, thank you so much. Thank you, Susan. This amazing organization is so invested in our originators better understanding, the buyers. As Candy mentioned, June is a very important month because it's also home ownership month. So to better understand our buyers, today's presentation, we'll talk about the state of the housing market. We'll talk about what the buyer persona looks like and why the importance of this buyer persona. I think you're going to really get some great nuggets from today's presentation. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague in the industry, Ricardo Peinado, and we're going to hear about some wealth building from Nora. All right, let's get started. Next slide, please. With the state of the housing market, instead of coming heavy with forecast, what we're doing at Freddie Mac is really talking about some trends that are impacting our originators right now so that you can better understand the market. Opposite of 2009, we have $29 trillion worth of wealth accumulated. Now, this is going to be something that is actually a historical high. Opposite of 2009, when we used to get buyers into homes, tell them, hey, in 6 months or a year, once that seasoning period had, basically come to fruition, we were going to refinance them and get them into another home. Unfortunately, we saw what happened thereafter. We only have $12.5 trillion worth of unpaid mortgage debt. And I say that we only have $12.5 trillion because we have 71.2 million millennials out there. 50 million have not bought a home. This number should be so much higher. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to something that, believe it or not, is quite a shock to us, is housing appreciation. Listen, I just mentioned that demand is not going away. As a matter of fact, it's getting larger. And we'll talk about that in a quick sec. As I mentioned, all of these millennials that haven't bought a home, 50 million of them, are actually, deciding, is this the right time to buy a home? Well, this heat map really represents this. In a downward market, 72% of the nation either retained wealth or accumulated wealth. Now let's focus on California. One of the top markets. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back one slide. One of the top markets. We did not lose too much appreciation. We're only at -1%. Why? Why, if we know, and I'll talk about migration in a minute, it's deemed as a high cost area or an unaffordable area. It's the demand. Those 50 million millennials historically flock to coastal areas for universities and then jobs. So California still, and I'll show you with some great micro data, we still are in an in-demand state. So I have to tell you, if you have a millennial that says, gosh, it's not the right time to buy, it's such a bad investment, please look at this slide. In a downward market, this is a historical slide, we still held most of housing appreciation on a national level. Next slide, please. One of my favorite conversations that we've been working on at Freddie Mac since 2020 is migration. Oh my gosh, it's one of the biggest topics I get asked to speak on. So migration, two types of migrations happening right now, and it's impacting our realtor partners, our originators, really our entire industry. Now, we have inbound, outbound state migration. California, we are one of those big states where we had a huge exodus of millennials leave us during COVID due to remote work. And then guess what? They landed in all of these Midwest states. They were there for a couple of years. Yes, it was affordable. They drove up demand. But guess what? A lot of them want to come back to California. And now the point of entry to get back into our state may not be attainable. Now, second type of migration, which I'll tell you, if we get any realtors listening in, this is your nugget. There's a second type of migration happening. It's out of urban, out of suburban, and into rural. These millennials got a little smarter than our entire industry, and they just started migrating out. I do have to tell you, millennials love remote work. That's extremely important to them. So as they're seeking new jobs or moving around, remote work is going to be very important to them because they're seeking pockets of affordability within our state. And I have to tell you, I've traveled the entire state extensively, especially every top MSA, and there's pockets of affordability. I'm going to show you a free tool that's going to help you find those pockets. No need to rebuild your business, just a little bit of a pivot. Now that next slide, Susan, that's fantastic. Lack of inventory, that truly is the challenge right now. This is not a new challenge to us. And a lot of our new industry partners think lack of inventory is because of COVID. Absolutely not. It's actually due to that 2009 mortgage crisis. Most of these amazing builders went out of business, couldn't keep these loans on their portfolio and actually didn't come back. They couldn't, it's not profitable to build affordable housing, especially because a lot of these local, state, federal policymakers made so many changes to builders that impacted the cost of the build. According to the National Builders Association, there's a few reasons why they're not building or they're not able to build on the mass number that we need. So first, let's start with how much inventory do we truly need? Well, I have to tell you, we need about 5 million units built each year for the next 10 years. And that's barely to catch up with a little bit of this demand. And when I say demand, and I say the demand keeps growing, I've got these older millennials and then younger Gen Zers that are ready to buy a home. So the demand is just going to get larger. The demand does not go away. Now, I mentioned a couple of reasons why builders are not building, definitely cost of lumber, lack of lumber. And guess what? A big opioid crisis happening within the builder community. They're losing a ton of manpower. So we definitely need more bodies to be able to build these homes. And as you can see, California, red represents, real serious lack of inventory. Most of our entire state actually needs excess of inventory. And you'll see why. We have so many millennials in the state. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about some buyer demographics. Let me tell you what this buyer looks like. What is it? What is the buyer persona? Next slide, please. First things first is we're talking about diversity within our buyer portfolio. Let me tell you, this buyer demographic is the most diverse we've ever seen. And with diversity comes new buyer challenges. The Latino, API, Native, and Black communities are actually now faced with different types of buyer challenges. And we'll talk about them in a minute. But I have to show you this slide really represents how ethnically diverse this age demographic is. And hang tight, because I've got Gen Zers that are even more diverse. So better understanding these buyers is going to be a great way for you to create a niche clientele. And it's going to be very important. Someone actually in a presentation not too long ago said, Nora, where's the low-hanging fruit? No, see, in today's housing economy, there is no low-hanging fruit. You have to be that subject matter expert to be able to identify this is a great buyer or this is a niche clientele I want to work with, and become that subject matter expert. Better understanding the buyer challenges, and you are the solution, is going to be a way that you're going to be able to grow your business. Next slide, please. Now, interestingly enough, these millennials have so many higher learning degrees. They have more higher learning degrees than any other age demographic in American history. So they are out earning every other age demographic at their exact age. Now, what's interesting is if there was inventory, this would be a powerful buyer, and we would have so much to talk about how fascinating this buyer demographic is. But due to lack of inventory and increase in them not being able to afford housing, it's really a buyer where we can actually appreciate that they are definitely strong wage earners, and they are continuing to accumulate income, but not wealth. And Ricardo and I will talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. Now, at Freddie Mac, we did this phenomenal survey that a lot of our industry partners have borrowed from us. And this is such great data because it really talks to today's buyer. Interestingly enough, and this is a historical tidbit, 40% of the buyers, first-time home buyers that we surveyed, said, I'm willing to migrate. I need to migrate because I need to be able to find a home I can afford. Now, a lot of them actually, migration equaled remote work. So keep that in mind. If you're interviewing a buyer, new questions you should be asking is, are you a remote employee? Can I share that with my realtor partner? Are you willing to be? Is that something that's important to you to be able to qualify and get an offer accepted? 82% of these millennials said, I'm confident I am going to be able to manage my finances well. Now that's amazing. And remember, their earning power is very strong. I'm going to dispel a few myths about their finances. They don't have as much student loan debt as they make it out to be. And what's interesting is only 32% of these millennials actually carry student loan debt. They carry about $34,000 worth of debt. Now, when they say they're drowning, these are not heavy credit card user buyer personas. However, that's their total debt. So sure, it feels very, impactful to them. However, we have to dispel the myth. Freddie Mac, we have a positive way of calculating student loan debt, and it's 0.5%. Please do run LPA, switch it if you're up on a ratio issue to be able to qualify this buyer. I find it interesting that 54% of these millennials, once our survey concluded, said, I'm ready to buy a home. I should have bought a home. I think I'm going to buy a home in the next 2 years. And we said, no, 2 years too late. Please don't, because housing appreciation and these appreciation numbers are not going to stop and wait for you to collect your documents and finally decide to buy a home. Absolutely not. We're going to see an increase in housing appreciation. So if you qualify this year and you don't buy this year, next year, you're going to need a non-occupant cosigner, a second signer, a third signer, or a fourth signer. Guess what? That sounds like a strategy. As a Latino, we've been doing that type of strategy to be able to purchase homes for a very long time. Let me tell you, it was grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, aunt and uncle, and sometimes the children on these loans. So please do know these type of strategies are really impacting your business. Understanding the strategies or thinking outside the box is going to be very impactful. Next slide, please. Now, during our study, there was a lot of aha moments where we said, whoa, I can't believe this. This was one of them. So most of these millennials that were part of this amazing study said, I need 20% down to buy a home. That's why I haven't bought a home. Number two, they said, I don't think I qualify. I don't have perfect credit. Or they said, I have student loan debt. By the way, it's really a bad time to buy a home. Well, first, let's talk about that 20% down. We never upsell from FHA. FHA is a phenomenal program that really saved us during the crisis. But I have to tell you, we are now in a lack of inventory issue, not a 2009 crisis. So helping these buyers accumulate wealth utilizing a conventional conforming 3% down program with down payment assistance if they qualify is going to be very important. And I think it's a really great way for you to just show all of your amazing subject matter expertise when it comes to structuring a transaction. Realtors working with amazing loan officers that know their programs is going to be very important. Today, I bring you 3 programs, 1 to solve inventory and 2 for first-time home buyers. So hang tight. Again, if they qualify for any other program, talk to them, explain to them all the programs that they qualify for. Now, the biggest aha moment during our survey, but also just in our millennial knowledge and buyer persona that we've been studying, is that while they're highly educated, they have more higher learning degrees than ever before, than any other age demographic. They have more PhDs. This is a very, very smart buyer you're speaking to. They have minimal financial literacy. Universities are not teaching financial literacy. And I have to tell you, baby boomer and Gen X parents that experienced the crisis basically told these buyers, hey, especially the older millennials, hey, don't buy a home. It may not be the right time to buy a home, or you don't have 20% down. You have student loan debt. You don't have perfect credit. You will not be able to qualify for a home. Now, for a very long time, these millennials used to say, I can't wait for that European experience. But COVID happened. And guess what? They're not interested in the experience. So now the older millennials are living in urban rents, apartments, and paying these high urban rents. And it's just not sustainable for them to live at home with mom and dad. Now, let's talk about our industry and these millennials. So really quickly, we have to close a big conversational gap. You are the solution for these millennials to get in. Remember, these millennials are quite diverse. They really need your help. So what is the age of the oldest millennial out there? It's 45. They're turning 45 this year. What's the age of the youngest millennial? 25. That older millennial I mentioned is creating household formations. They're getting married. They're having children. Can't live with mom and dad in their, we'll talk about this in a minute, ADUs. Can't live with mom and dad in their ADUs because they're creating these household formations. But rent is now, especially in California, almost equivalent to a mortgage. And I wondered, what does that mortgage payment look like, PITI with MI, in a rural location versus an urban rent? So with that, how old is that youngest millennial? I mentioned 25. Guess what? They've graduated college. They are fully immersed in the workforce. They have a different persona of homeownership. Younger millennials think older millennials did it all wrong, but hang tight because these Gen Zers, they think they all did it wrong and they can't wait to buy a home, and they are creating their own strategies. It may look like mom and dad helping with the down payment. It may be siblings on a transaction together. They'll wait a year with this high appreciation at, I mentioned historical highs. They're going to refinance them. They're going to buy that second person a home. And then thereafter, and that's how they're going to get into housing, because that appreciation I mentioned, the demand is not going away. It's going to continue to increase until we get some inventory. All right, next slide. With that, let's talk about an actual strategy. This is a lot of information, and I love data and analytics, but I love explaining it to you in a way you can digest it and go back to your office after you see this presentation and say, wow, there's an actual strategy out there. Low-hanging fruit, not so much right now, okay? However, these are the 3 pockets of buyers we believe that you'll be able to help. So, as we know, California, so many Latinos in California. This is a fantastic buyer. You can become a niche. Now, most times people say, Nora, I hate to disappoint you. I don't speak Spanish. Don't worry, neither do these millennials. Most of them are second language speakers. Guess what? They speak English. They need your help. Their parents definitely probably only speak Spanish, some of them. However, these millennials, they understand English. So you can be an ally to this community. I mentioned another buyer demographic, millennials. Can't speak on millennials enough. Remember, there's older millennials and younger millennials. Now, we have to close a big conversational gap. And I mentioned that in our earlier slide. According to NMLS, the age of the average originator in America is 54. According to the DRE, the average age of a realtor in America is 56. Do you think there's a conversational gap? I would like to say yes. And most of these millennials said that during our survey. So you better understanding the buyer and really being that subject matter expert in your community. Becoming the trusted advisor is the way you're going to grow your business. Remember, there's a lot of minority millennials out there that need your help. Now, let's mention Black African American buyers. Historically, they have a big wealth gap. They have grandma and grandpa was a renter, mom and dad was a renter. I'm a renter, nor I don't know how to buy a home. You are the solution. Now, in this strategy, we created some information for you out of our survey and some of our great data that we have at Freddie Mac. Now, something to know is, who do they go to when they're ready to buy a home? Let's talk about millennials for a quick minute. Well, they go to mom and dad. They go to family and friends. But guess what? Mom and dad hasn't bought a home in the last 10 to 15 years due to lack of inventory. And grandma and grandpa haven't bought a home in the last 15 to 20 years. They're sitting on a ton of equity. The experts are you. You are listening to this presentation from the California MBA. You are hearing the latest programs that Freddie Mac, one of the 2 GSEs, is out there creating for first-time home buyers. You truly are the expert, but also you're the financial literacy expert. You know our guidelines. You know how to structure these loans. They tend to go to realtor websites. They love the MLS listings. Lovely home with a gorgeous porch. That makes them want to buy a home. Well, guess what? It should be financial literacy. How do you grow your business? Guess what? The strategy is more home buyer events, more financial literacy events. Talk about credit on social media. Talk about assets. Why do you need 3 FICO scores? What are the 3 FICO scores? Tell me about assets. Why can't you black out that account number? Freddie Mac won't buy that loan. Why? Explain to them, but also host home buyer events. Partner with your realtor partners. This truly is a strategy document that I would save to my favorites if I was still originating. So this is a great way for you to really grow your business. Also, we included the barriers. What is it? For millennials, it's lack of knowledge. What are their needs? Qualifying for a mortgage. That's extremely important. By the way, I'm very smart. If you Google financial literacy, there's nothing out there. It won't give you the entire process. And that's not just the mortgage process, the total overall process. So you truly are the expert. And topics of interest. How do you engage with them? Please don't scare them and say, hey, would you like to buy a home? Or are you interested in getting pre-approved? They might definitely say, no, thank you, not interested. No, instead, talk about financial planning. That's very important to them. How do they transfer wealth, to their children? Remember, millennials are 45 years old, the older millennials. They're now thinking of financial planning, debt management, credit improvement. How do I fix my credit? By the way, I'm going to show you some FICO scores in California. Hopefully they'll impress you. This is not a huge issue. So not as big as they make it out to be. Maybe an issue with some clients. What platforms? Where do you find them? Instagram and Facebook, but also TikTok recently. Next slide, please. So this is a really fantastic document. You can go out there. Please do not forget, single women, second largest buying demographic. I am not a single woman myself, but I support them. I'm an ally to this community. Okay, what's happening in California? Now, I broke it out in NorCal, Southern California, because those are the top MSAs. Next slide. How many millennials are out there? Well, guess what, California? You're full of millennials. As I was breaking down this buyer demographic, I thought, oh my gosh, this is not the same amount of millennials that I get to present in Texas and in New Mexico next week while I'm there in person. Millennials are definitely in California. You have the buyer population out here. Remember, millennials are migrating within the state. If you're in NorCal, start looking at some pockets of affordability outside of Sacramento. There's a lot of really great opportunities out there. So I broke it out by the top counties: Sacramento, Placer, Yolo, El Dorado. Guess what? Yolo has the most millennial buyer demographic. And I broke it out by older millennials and younger millennials. Next slide, please. Now, what about Southern California? Oh, yeah. Orange County, so many millennials there. Los Angeles has a ton of millennials. Long Beach. This really is a huge state for millennial migration, and it's a lot of outbound millennial migration. So we have the buyer opportunity to help these millennials. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to minority share, a lot of times they're like, gosh, Nora, I hate to tell you, there's no minorities here. Well, we can't say that in California for sure. I live in LA. What's interesting is we have the largest, one of the larger California Latino populations. So you have so many Latinos, as you could see through this graph, not just in NorCal, but all of Southern California. Next slide. That really is your biggest minority buyer opportunity. Almost 47% of our entire state actually is that Latino demographic. So Latino demographic, we are just really full of Latino buyers. By the way, something that's very concerning to Latinos is understanding financial literacy, don't understand credit, don't understand the banking system. That will be a really great way for you to close the conversation with them. Next slide, please. Now, I love to also mention FICO scores, because half the time I show up, before I show my data, they're like, hey, Nora, everyone has horrible FICO scores here. Not in California. So by national standards, US has a mid FICO of 681. Great job, California. This is, I'm sorry, the US. Great job, US. This actually is quite high compared to our 2009 FICO score during the crisis. California, 698, great. Sacramento County, 693, Yolo, 713. El Dorado, 714, and Placer, 724. Now, what I find interesting is when I look into these FICO scores, and I did a little more research, I was looking at financial literacy, a lot of these financial employment. Why are these FICO scores continuing to increase? And it was affluent areas. So I have to tell you, the more affluent area you get into it for your buyer, FICO scores look much better. Next slide, please. Now, Southern California, same thing, not bad. Let me tell you, at Freddie Mac, those are acceptable FICO scores all day, every day except weekends. We're closed on the weekends. US FICO score, 681, California, 698. Now, I lumped up the bigger Southern California MSAs, 697 all day, absolutely not an issue. Next slide, please. Now, what does this mean for your buyer? Please do not get plagued with all the bad misinformation on social media. There are buyers out there. Purchases are going to remain strong. That demand is not going away. We need to close the gap for buyers, minorities, and affordable housing. There's a ton of first-time home buyers out there paying urban rents. They probably equate, or in some MSAs, are probably paying over what a mortgage rent would be in a rural location. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about some solve for lack of inventory. What's the average, next slide, please. What's the average age of a home in America? By the way, I travel with builders, and I go into homes that we are looking at to see, what do the homes look like all across the country? Well, guess what? Average age of a home in America is 50 years old. Can you imagine the plumbing and the electrical on those homes? Well, I've seen it. Let me tell you, it's not pretty. We really have to come up with with a solve. We know builders are just not going to build as much inventory as soon as we need it. So we have to come up with some solutions. I'm part of an amazing working group, a think tank at Freddie Mac, and we're working on ADUs. Next slide. Now, ADUs, you guys, we are the most ADU friendly state. Next slide, please. I have to tell you, most counties allow for ADUs in California, but I'm in Southern California, and I have to tell you, it is in my neighborhood. I see MLS listings with ADUs constantly. Now, what is an ADU? Well, it's a converted garage or a basement or an actual separate dwelling. It cannot be larger than your subject matter, than your subject dwelling. And it has a kitchen, a separate entrance, contributes less to the value of the home. So I told you it can't be larger, includes a bathroom, and is independent from the primary dwelling unit. So in other words, it has to have its own entrance. Next slide, please. Now, at Freddie Mac, we understand we've got to pivot and change with the industry. Do you know how hard it is to change guidelines at Freddie Mac? Yes, very hard. I have to tell you, when I'm not traveling, that's all we do. We work and research and try to really expand guidelines for you guys. So guess what? We used to only allow one ADU on a property. We now allow 1, 2, and 3 unit properties. This is fantastic. We also allow net rental income. You guys, this is a great way to get first-time home buyers into homes. A lot of them, and you'll hear from Ricardo in a minute, want to invest in, want to buy a home, but also live in it and have an investment property. Guess what? ADUs is the way to do it. Next slide, please. Now, I think it's fantastic that as a first-time home buyer, you may not have landlord experience, and that's okay. Some of our amazing MI companies are giving free landlord education. That's all you need. We now have very clear guidelines on appraisal requirements. You heard we've got amazing Candy who works on appraisals, and we even partner with the Appraisal Institute. And we do training on this type of product so that we get appraisers out there appraising the homes effectively. So net rec calculation, we're taking the standard 30% of total stable monthly income. We will need a lease. Landlord education, I mentioned MI companies are doing a great job of supporting us. Next slide, please. Now, for the rest of the country, let's talk about some affordable programs to get the buyer into the home. ADU can be used with these 2 programs. Next slide. Home Possible. And you're probably going to have to click a couple of these, Susan. Now, let me tell you, I love it. When I show up in all of California, all these MSAs, they're like, Nora, sorry, can't use Home Possible out here. Don't say that to me. I'm going to give you a free tool to find those pockets of affordability. And I have to tell you, in LA, I'm in Whittier, there are so many zip codes that now qualify for Home Possible. You don't have to memorize your AMI limits. I'm about to show you a tool. Once they change, we update it right away. We're also going to give you free down payment assistance program. But let's talk about this product really quickly. 3% down. Now, I have to tell you, many minorities are utilized by their parents to qualify for a mortgage. I mentioned Latinos. We get the children to even qualify once they get a job. Guess what? This allows repeat buyers, does not have to be a first-time home buyer, and can be layered with down payment assistance. There's flexible sources of funds, and this really is a great way. Yes, is it income and property driven? Absolutely. However, hang tight. There's another program that is not, that I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. I mentioned this amazing tool. I don't want you to revamp your business. On the top my left-hand side corner, you're going to see a search engine. You can actually type in an address, a city, a zip code, an MSA, a state. It doesn't matter. Type in the information. You're going to get updated AMI limits. You're also going to get this awesome, I actually put a little arrow, down payment assistance program. And it's a link to any type of down payment assistance that qualifies for that particular address. And we're going to give you a link. You're going to go directly into that down payment assistance website. You're going to read their guidelines, and it gives you a link for you to be able to become certified to do those type of programs. Now, also, AMI limits may be changing, have changed. Anytime they changed, We will update this information. No more memorizing them. By the way, I forgot to mention, down payment assistance, if they're out of funds, we're going to gray out the link. We're going to let you know within 48 hours. Don't go here. They're out of funds. Go here. So really fantastic way. As you can see here at the bottom, we have, or I included a live link. If you want a copy of my deck, reach out to my partners over at the California MBA. They'll gladly get you a copy of my deck. Next slide, please. Now, for the rest of the country, anytime you need a first-time home buyer program, this truly is a first-time home buyer. So one buyer or one person on the loan has to actually be a first-time home buyer. The other one doesn't have to be. No income or geography restrictions. Yes, you can layer down payment assistance. This is called our Home One program, and it truly is our 3% down program. Now, next slide, please. I speak really fast. As a Latina, it's in my nature to get through this data quickly so we can hear about Ricardo's amazing wealth information. We created at Freddie Mac a really great cheat sheet on the two programs. Please don't worry about memorizing this. This really is a fantastic way for you to better serve your buyers. So now you know about ADUs. We have webinars constantly where we're training originators how to originate these programs. And we have these two affordable programs. With that, I conclude this data portion of my presentation. I turn it over to my industry partner, Ricardo Peinado, president of Suntender Valuations. Ricardo, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nora. That was tremendous information that you provided on behalf of Freddie Mac, as it is critical in educating the community on the current market in order for buyers to take action. Everything you went over, the education is key to growing one's foundational wealth and then turning that into generational wealth. Oftentimes, you need that foundation so then the generations in the future can be able to benefit from those opportunities. So thank you so much for sharing. All right, so I'm going to go and start presenting on behalf of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals and the Hispanic Wealth Project. So we'll go on to the next slide, and here you'll see the 10 principles on the slide are basically how to sustain and build long-term wealth, and then from there grow your generational wealth. Oftentimes, what do you hear? There's a lotto winner or somebody inherited a large sum of money, and what happens oftentimes? Guess what? They don't have the habits to sustain the money in-house. So they take on habits that they've always been doing, which allow them to spend in this culture of we want the newest and best thing. And so instead of thinking about long-term investments, they just spend, and unfortunately, they don't have the habits to maintain that wealth. So today, there's 10 principles on the page right now, and I'm going to be focusing on 2 of them. The first one I will focus on is going to be having a mature understanding of wealth and prosperity, because the one with the most toys usually loses. And the next one I'm going to dig into is going to be number 5, and that's invest at least 20% of your income in real estate or stocks. And investing in a business is not something that you would consider as part of that 20% income, only because there is a high risk and high reward when it comes to investing just in a business directly. So you want to focus in on the real estate and on stocks. All right, we'll go move on to the next slide. And here we're going to focus on number 1, top 10 principle, and that's have a mature understanding of wealth and prosperity, because the one with the most toys usually loses. So as a child, and even today, as a grown-up, oftentimes we want the newest toy. We want the best gadget. We want the newest cell phone. But oftentimes, that's not the best choice. As a child, I was blessed to have 2 wonderful parents who didn't live beyond their means. As a child, I wanted the new toy, just like everybody else. You know, I wanted the expensive Nikes. My parents would say, you know what, let's be smart with our decision making, and let's not get that newest toy, because they knew and they understood the long-term benefits of sacrificing something today for tomorrow. And so I look back on those decisions they made, and I'm extremely grateful because their focus was not on purchasing the newest gadget for me to play with, but instilling long-term habits to so I can make the proper decisions in my future. Let's stop and think about possibly the great investor of all time. And Nora, you mentioned him, the Oracle of Omaha, yesterday when we were talking, aka Warren Buffett. So the chair and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway is arguably one of the greatest investors of all time. Where does Warren Buffett live? See, well, he must live in a mansion, you know, on the coast. Nope. He lives in Omaha, and he lives in his house that he purchased back in 1958. Okay, well, he has to have a Ferrari. That's what he's got to be driving. But no, guess what? He has a 2014 Cadillac that was damaged during a hailstorm, is what he drives on a daily basis. So Warren Buffett is a perfect example of understanding what wealth is, having a mature understanding of what true wealth is. The businesses that he has, that he's invested in, they were everything. Anytime you take any risk and you're going to go invest in anything, you're always going to have a risk. But he would calculate it to make sure that the risk was as minimal as possible. So there was longevity in his growth and in his businesses. And as you can see that's why his companies are worth so much now today. And so he would take the time to make sure that he knew what to invest in, what not to invest in. So does living in your original house or driving an old car, is that going to guarantee your wealth? No, by no means is it going to do that. But what it does is it allows you to have more revenue, more income put into different streams of investments if you choose to go that route, and possibly create that foundational generational wealth so you can have more freedom down the road. So that's why you want to hold off on the instant gratification of why we say having those who usually have the most toys usually loses. So this number one top 10 principle is focused on the steps you need to take personally and accountability in order to achieve your long-term success. So, all right, Susan, if we can go on to the next slide, please. All right, next, I want to focus in on principle number 5. Invest at least 20% of your income in real estate and stocks, because they are the best and safest way to build wealth. Once again, earlier I mentioned investing in other businesses doesn't count, only because obviously you are investing, but there's a risk there that you don't want to take on with that 20%. You want to allocate that towards real estate or towards stocks because of the history behind it, and the fact that it's been proven that long-term, you're going to grow wealth via those channels. As a kid, so earlier I mentioned, as a kid, I didn't get the best gadgets. I didn't get the newest toys, things such as that. But as a kid, I was extremely spoiled. I didn't realize it at the time. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't have all the toys, but I had role models that paved the way for my success and growth today. I always admired my parents and uncles and aunts for their investments in real estate. My parents first invested in a single family home in Oakland, California. Then down the road, we moved to a local suburb nearby, and that home became a second home. And then we had a new primary home. In addition to that, my parents also invested in a multi-unit property. And that's kind of where I fell in love in the repairing and being around real estate, because I would always go every time there were repairs or something I could get done over at the apartments, I'd go with my dad, tag along, spend time with them. And it basically created an affinity for me in regards to around real estate. So now, in addition to that, I was also blessed to have 3 uncles in particular, one who was a real estate agent, who were investors in real estate. And then also I had my uncles and aunts who maybe they didn't invest in multiple real estate, but they purchased their own single family homes. So from a young age, all my siblings, all my family, we were blessed to see that there was stability in the home, because my parents, my uncles, my aunts, they worked to create that foundation where they can have a home to go to. And then from there, some of them decided to go further and invest further. Other ones decided that that was enough. But now today, a lot of them still own that same home. They have foundational wealth. They're not struggling, and they're blessed to have a great life now. And it all started from that small foundation of investing into their first home and being hard workers and being consistent in regard to what they were doing. So that's one huge blessing that I had. So I also want to go into how that's why I feel I was particularly spoiled, because I was blessed with this family of real estate investors. So it was clear the next steps of my life. Obviously, it wasn't guaranteed it was going to happen, but when you're around something, just like Nora, earlier you said in California, you have, almost 700 credit scores. What's happening? People around you uplift you. They uplift each other. The community uplifts each other. In affluent areas, the credit scores are always a lot higher. Same thing. So me being around the community of my family, and they were looking into investing in real estate, basically planted that seed in me that's something that I had to do to attain my wealth, and just to do something as I grew and got older. So I was extremely blessed with that situation. In addition to real estate, we also want to focus on stocks when it comes to the principle number 5. So stocks are a great long-term wealth building tool that often goes overlooked because of the lack of education. Earlier, Nora mentioned the financial planning literacy out there. You look it up, there's really little out there. We often hear about, but we will hear about the volatile stock market that's out there, or how a stock went from $100 to $20 and they lost their entire portfolio. But this goes back to proper education. Oftentimes, if you're investing in one stock, it's a high risk, high reward. And this goes back to the education that we're lacking and we're not getting out there. Realizing you can invest in an index or mutual fund where it's multiple stocks all combined together, where if one stock goes bad, it's going to go bad, but the overall stock portfolio that you invested in is not going to drop that significantly because you have other stocks uplifting it. So that's why it's key to get education and understand what it is to invest in the stock market and how you can do it to minimize your actual exposure. The long-term growth in the stock market has been fundamental to so many investors, creating millions. Warren Buffett, as mentioned earlier, is a perfect example of someone who utilized the stock market to create financial freedom for himself and for many others today. So once again, honing in on the number 5 top 10 principle, it's focused on investing. And I believe the key is building your team. Earlier, Nora mentioned in regards to utilizing Freddie Mac and utilizing professionals out there. That's so important. In order to make proper investments in real estate or the stock market, you need a team. When it comes to real estate, you need a lender to help you actually finance the transaction. Obviously, nowadays, people choose not to go with a real estate agent, or they choose to go on their own. However it is you're going to do it. But if you go with a real estate professional, they live this, they breathe this. So who do you want to do the electrical, panel in your house? An electrician who's certified and has a license, because they're the experts in the field. So that's why it'd be highly recommended to use a real estate professional to help you find those properties. Earlier, Nora mentioned the demand is extremely high. So if the demand is high, that means there's going to be less properties that are going to be sitting out there. But if you have a real estate professional who's looking out for your best interest and working on a daily basis to make sure that he can find you that home, they'll find it for you, because that's their task. That's their profession. That's what they're specializing in. So that's why it's important to build a team. When it comes to investing in the stock market, you can also go out of your loan. Alone, you can, but make sure that you're obviously going to have to utilize a team in one sense, because you'll have to find resources online that are going to be good resources. They're going to be reading to educate yourself. Investing in yourself is critical to knowing what you're going to do in the stock market. If not, you can lose a lot of money. The other thing you can do is you can also tap other professionals, certified financial planners you can reach out to. And so that's key in regards to growing that team. And it's fundamental to realize that. So in closing, I'd like to basically go into the following slide, the last slide. And basically, I just want to say what I would like to share as my 2 main talking points I'd like you to take away is, number 1 is self-accountability. It's critical that we establish habits that we take ownership for, because in order to reach your full potential, you have to get up. You have to decide you're going to, go talk to that lender and apply. You're going to have to decide if you want to invest in that stock with that certified financial planner. It's critical that you determine that habit. Now, number 2 is, along with that self-accountability, where obviously we're going to be like, it's about me, I'm doing it, I did it myself. Well, guess what? Number 2 is humility, because without having the proper team around you, you will fail. The reality is Warren Buffett's successful. I'm blessed as well. All the professionals, Nora, everyone that you'll see in this podcast, in the community around you, when you look ultimately at how they created their success, 1, they took action on themselves. They helped themselves accountable. They developed great habits. But then they formed that team, and they knew that it wasn't going to be about them, but it was about the community that they're going to build around them. And that's ultimately what you need to do. So once again, you can't do it alone, but you must be accountable each day for yourself to put together your financial team. It's in your control to determine your future, and that will entail some hard decision making. But in the end, the answers will be clear. So thank you so much, Susan and Ty, and Nora as well. And I'll go pass it back over to Nora to go into our chat.
Perfect. Ricardo, so many amazing nuggets. I feel like we prepared our industry partners, our originators, our realtor partners that are going to see this, presentation, and they're going to say, wow, data, analytics, strategy, this is what's happening truly in the industry. No more, bad information out there. And then wealth building. We talked about the importance of financial literacy for our buyers, but also financial literacy for our originators, our realtor partners. It's interesting, while we are experts, sometimes realtors don't own homes. Sometimes our originators are not investing, in properties. And I think this is a fantastic conversation for us to have. I almost feel like it was the secret sauce. Everyone talks about the challenges out there. I mean, I'm on panels all the time. I'm in presentations. Everyone only recycles the challenges. Like, hey, let's talk about this challenge for the 30th time. And I think you and I and, Susan came up with this great idea, their committee of let's just talk about something other than interest rates, let's talk about solutions. How do we support our industry partners? So thank you. Those nuggets were fantastic. And you and I really did connect on Warren Buffett. I said, oh my gosh, look into this. This is fantastic. Something I studied while at Purdue, definitely studied his, just his trajectory. And I think it's fantastic. And it can be obtained by most of us. By the way, I'm an immigrant and coming to America, I remember as a little girl, my mom saying, we have to buy a home. No matter what happens, what we're doing, we're buying a home. I was 3 years old when we bought our first home. And I still remember that conversation, saving all of our money to make sure we invested in a home. And of course, purchased homes thereafter. But I was less than 26 years old when I bought my first home. And it was one of the biggest goals my family had for us children. You have to buy a home. And of course, I'm a Gen Xer, so that speaks volumes. What else can we talk about, before we close out? I think, it's important for you to really talk about this wealth building to our industry partners. I know you mentioned it. What is the biggest takeaway you think? What is an actionable item they can do right away?
Well, I think an actionable item they can do right away is you hit it. I mean, you did one, you highlighted why people should buy. You went over, obviously, you said right now the rates are high. People want to talk about the high rates. But guess what? The high rates have actually been one of the biggest blessings to them ever. Because guess what? Home appreciation has basically stopped. It's basically at zero when it should be going down. So what does that tell you? When rates are no longer a problem, then now affordability is going to be an even bigger problem. So you debunked why not to buy and highlighted why you should buy. So like I said, you did a great job on that. Let me see, just a wealth of knowledge. I was taking all these notes just because as I was going through. And then also another thing you did was critical. You said over in regards to strategy. Yeah. The thing is you have a slide that perfectly educated everybody on how to take a strategy and go forward and take action. The greatest thing I think is basically take action. So oftentimes people aren't doing that. You already alluded to as well that the millennials and the new generation is basically the most educated. They have the highest credit scores. Yeah. But I think what's happening is, earlier you said, financial literacy is missing. What financial literacy is missing, guess what happens? We pause. You're going to pause because you don't know what to do. You don't know who to trust. And so it's important that people, oftentimes I'm the one that they say sometimes that men don't ask for directions. I stop. I'm the first one that stops because I don't want to waste my energy going in circles. And so what I recommend is going off the knowledge you shared and making sure that people understand, take the step, ask the questions, take the initiative. I'll actually make a video every once in a while saying my daily reminder on occasion, and it'll be get me qualified. Because the thing is the things aren't going to change. There's going to be higher demand, and the home prices eventually are going to start, even with the higher interest rates, are going to start increasing because guess what you alluded to as well? Freddie Mac has tremendous programs that are making it so more qualified buyers are out there. So when you have, the demand is basically when you have home building basically staying steady, but you have a pool of buyers that are increasing, the demand's going to go higher. So yeah. I highly recommend taking action. And the one thing is the key is I always say this to anybody who's saying they're having issues. And I say, look, fix your credit. If there's anything you can do for anybody that I know from a kid from a young age, I said, just make sure you have great credit, because to earn $100,000 is going to take a long time. But guess what? You can walk into a bank and they'll lend you $100,000 in less than 10 minutes if you're the great qualified buyer, depending on what's going on. So that's like I said, it's a long-winded, but like I said, there was so much you shared, and it was so critical that I wanted to re-share it to everybody and just focus on the great credit, and just thank you so much for all the knowledge. And then on the ADUs, how do you feel, or what do you think is something that can a barrier, or kind of what's going on with ADUs in Southern California compared to Northern California?
No, what's interesting is I mentioned ADU is such a friendly housing policy state. So ADUs are going to really take over our state. That's going to be a solve for lack of inventory. As I worked on this amazing working team on ADUs, I better understood, so many multi-generational minority families actually favor ADUs, because remember, as Latinos, you and I probably can share similar stories. My grandma helped raise us. She came to America. My mom and dad worked. Grandma lived with us forever. We had an ADU here in Southern California. I live in an area right outside of LA, very ADU friendly, but so is the whole rest of the state. As I'm traveling, we have to come up with solutions for ADUs. Now, listen, as a proud Latina, we had that cousin who worked in construction, had one bag of cement left over, turned a garage into a home. Yeah. Was it permitted? Absolutely not. We didn't care. However, guess what? Freddie Mac even buys those homes and finances those homes as long as they're great, health and safety. I mean, we don't want a wall falling off or anything like that. But Ricardo, imagine how impactful this is that at Freddie Mac, we change guidelines just to support this product, to be able to get more buyers into homes, now, collect rents and qualify on those rents, and wealth build. I can't speak on it enough. You guys, I feel like I'm the ADU guru. I'm so passionate about ADUs because everyone continuously says there's no inventory, and they mention it to me, and I agree. We agree with you, but we really have to pivot as an industry and better understand other products. I think, I think the more our industry better understands more products, to be honest with you, the more they're going to really just start impacting their areas of expertise. Remember, being a trusted advisor is so important to these millennials. They have to trust someone. Mom and dad kind of scared the older millennials, and with rightful justification. 2009 was very hard for many families, and we understand it. There at Freddie Mac, we have so many modification agreements, forbearance agreements, help centers with HUD counselors. We want everyone to stay in homes. I'm sure that's what we all want. However, ADUs is a phenomenal solution to lack of inventory. With that, I think we're at time. I was just peeking at my little clock here, and I think we're at time. I'm going to ask Ty and our partner, Susan, to come up and close us out. Susan, Ty, thank you so much for inviting Ricardo and I. We are so excited. If you gave us an extra hour, we would continue to talk for another hour. I would pull out more data, and Ricardo would set us on the right path to build wealth.
Well, we are so excited that you guys were able to join us today. Thank you so much for this information. This was probably one of the most informative webinars I've seen in a really long time. And to Nora's earlier point, if you would like a copy of the slide deck presentation, please reach out to us here at CMBA. So from myself and Susan, thank you so much to Nora and Ricardo. Thank you to Candy for sponsoring this webinar series. And we will see you guys again soon on another webinar. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.